what Rio was thinking. Oh no, this is going to be a dark interview.
Well, thanks for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you. I really love the album. I played it probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, so thank you for taking a minute out.
Oh, yeah.
So, speaking of dark, and I know we're all getting tired of it, but COVID was such a tapestry, such a pall laid over all of us 4 years ago. How did you make it through it? How did it influence the fact that you have a live album, or did it influence this album?
Well, let's see. I feel like we had just finished touring, or we had just here, correct me guys, but like we had gotten like halfway through touring our last record, Weaver. We had just done the East Coast run, and then we were going to be on the West Coast in May of 2020, and so that got canceled.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, it felt like we had just like we were like had a nice momentum going. We had a nice run of shows, and then everything was stopped. And in that run, we were playing music from the Weaver record, but we also had already started workshopping this songs that are on this current record, Twin Top 5. And so there was like this weird kind of like record scratch pause between the momentum of like, we had another round of shows to do, and we probably would have recorded the record sooner, ?
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
And so I think we were eager to get back into the studio and document these songs. It's the longest I think we've gone without making a record since we've been making records. But I think, I won't put a good or bad on it, but it definitely changed, I think, probably the way that we recorded the record. We all were on the same page, like about how the sounds we wanted to get and the way we wanted to record it, in a way that probably that extra time gave us. But we're definitely in the spirit of live, playing together live. The spirit of liveness is really strong in this one. That would be my pandemic unpacking.
So I'm a kid. I'm a child of I grew up in the 80s. So the whole art, the art on here is just totally emblematic of that era. Was that what you were going for?
What were we going for? Well, we all kind of, our last record was, speaking of dark, was
oh man.
was kind of it wasn't dark, but it was just kind of had a more serious kind of brooding vibe, and the artwork was kind of intense, black and white, like
mystery.
Yeah. Which I loved. And then I don't know, I think the way that this record sounds, and the way, kind of like trying to tap into the playfulness that we have when we play live, we were like, this should be like a fun record.
Fun colors.
And so we used our friend and genius artist and designer David Woodruff, who we've worked with before, and we just kind of gave him some reference images of like colors that we liked and a few things that we kind of spoke to us, and he sent us pretty much the exact record cover, like one tiny little change, but that's what he sent back on like the first try, and we were like, I think that's it.
There it is.
Yeah.
So French noir to Max Headroom, it's a pretty good leap. So how did this happen? How did you all get together? How did Twin Talk, and what does Twin Talk mean? I'm sure you've been asked a million times, but what was kind of the nexus of the title of the band, and how did you all come together?
Katie, I think you take this one.
Oh, I was going to say, Andrew, you tell it best. It was 2012, February 1st. Dustin had some music that he wanted to try out. And I knew Dustin through a friend of mine. And we had met a few times. We weren't like close collaborators at that time. Dustin and Andrew had met through a different thing. So it was kind of like two different circles coming together. and I think we're like making an audition tape for something.
Oh yeah.
Next Gen Jazz Fest.
Yeah, there was some sort of like, if you record some music, you can get a gig or something. And we'd all moved to Chicago. We're just out of college and we're stoked and trying to get gigs. And we played and it felt really special. We just played like a standard to warm up, and the way that we played, the like kind of the pivots that were made, the way that we were listening felt like, whoa, like there was some like musical chemistry. And we were like, we should start a band. And we did. We didn't win that audition, I think. It didn't. Yeah. Nothing happened.
No, we didn't.
But we did just start we just started playing a lot and rehearsing a lot, and we've been a band since then. So it's like over 12 years now that we've been making music. For a while, we were just going by the classic jazz last names of Laurenzi, Ernst, Green, and it felt like a band and not just like three people's last names. It took us a while to find a band name. But at some point I have younger sisters that are identical twins. And so I made some reference to that phenomenon of twins and how they communicate with each other on a very personal level, on a very like kind of subtle level. And there's even like twins that have their own language. I'm like, like that twin talk thing. And that kind of echoed in what we're trying to do as a band, in the way that we listen and the way that we interact with each other, in the way that like we've really developed a very specific way of communicating with just three of us, that's in the spirit of the twin talk thing. So none of us are related. It bothers my dad that we're not triplet talk because there's three of us, but it's more of the philosophy of twin talk than the literal.
Yeah, that seems like an old man hang up, It's interesting when you said we should start a band. Why hasn't there been a band out there that's ever come up with that name for their band? Like the name of the band is we should.
There's talk. There's
there's a metal band called Cryptophagia.
Okay.
The name for twin talk, yeah.
But if they could just come up with the band name, we should start a band, it would be perfect.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's it. But it has to be out there somewhere. Some failed teen dream. I don't know. I'll have to Google it.
Sure. I was in a recording session, I think freshman year of high school, for a metal band, and we didn't have a band name. And, the engineer asked, like, hey, what should I put on the thing? And our guitarist went, I don't know, just put something random. And so that was our band name.
There you go.
And we hated it. It was so bad.
But what blows me away is that I understand that makes sense to me, but there's some people that name kids on the fly after they have the child, and they're like, I can't come up with a name, and they just throw out a name. There's been weird names that have happened. So band name on the fly, fine. You can modify that later, but a child, come on, we gotta be more careful.
Robert, that's such a weird name.
Right, I know, because then it becomes Bob and everybody spells it backwards. It's ugly,
Man, this is awesome.
Amazing.
So let me ask you this. All of you come into the band and you all have your very specific set of musical baggage that you come in with. So I want to know from each of you, what was the first live show that you saw that blew you away, that made you think, I want to do that one day?
We're all thinking, if this is radio.
Okay, while you think about that, jazz specifically, who have been influences that have been a part of you feeling the vibe of the trio and being in the band?
Let's see. Just in general, or that I've seen?
Just in general, just what has influenced the way that you play, the way that you found your voice, and how you've merged collectively with the trio to find Twin Talk's voice.
Yeah. I mean, like going way back to when I was, first getting into the saxophone, Sonny Rollins was like my number one, kind of still is.
Yeah.
But I remember that was someone who I like got really obsessed with early on, and it's like, I want to be doing this. Like, I want to figure that out and make music that feels like that. And I think, yeah, over time, and especially working together with Twin Talk, you know, our tastes expand and goals, you realize that you have goals that you couldn't have even like conceived of a few years ago. So with kind of our, you know, collective goal of playing together in a certain way and having a flexibility and a looseness and an openness, I think Ornette Coleman is someone who I think about a lot and listen to a lot, in terms of kind of getting me into that spirit of openness, but with structure involved, and kind of trying to like toe the line, but also play the song that you're playing and not totally go off in some random thing. Yeah, so people like that. And then there's a lot of Chicago kind of like bands and improvisers that have had a big influence on me. Joshua Abrams, Josh Berman, Mike Reed, Greg Ward, a lot of like ton of people. I feel like I've learned a lot from just getting to hear them and being like, oh, I see, like, especially when you can see someone in person while they're playing, you can see, you can pick up on certain things like, oh, when they did that, and then it turned into this other thing. And then, yeah, it's for sure Chicago people.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And for me, and I think for all of us to some extent, the idea of being able to like expand or truncate or kind of explore our own music whatever way we want to is like a main theme of our music. And the first place I kind of heard that was in a masterclass with Dave King, talking about playing with the Bad Plus and Happy Apple, where, you know, the goal is to play, you know, the songs, but like anything can derail anything at any moment, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually like what we aspire to be able to do, and to like embrace that derailment, because that's where the coolest stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a pretty important formative influence when I worked with, I did this thing called the Betty Carter Jazz Ahead program back in 2013 and 14. So it was like right as our band was just being more formed. And I got to watch Jason Moran, pianist, art person extraordinaire, and his band, the Bandwagon, with Nasheet Waits and Taurus Mateen. They were part of a bigger group of like artist jazz faculty for these young people. And watching that band, because it's, you know, it's similar, it's a trio and they play kind of freewheeling music. Not just their music, but the way that they interacted with each other, the way that they just all were very different people, personality wise and vibe wise, and how they gave each other space to be themselves and stuff, was really impactful. And I had a very clear memory of coming back to Twin Talk rehearsal after doing the Betty Carter thing and just being like, guys, I just saw this vibe and I want to have this vibe. And I'm like, what if we don't play our songs just like they're our songs? Like, what if we loosen things up and let more stuff happen? And I think we all wanted to do that anyways, but it was just like, I had a very clear, like, I just saw it, it exists, we could do it. And so that was a real pivot point in our band's trajectory. Like it really kind of solidified stuff. Totally. And I don't think our stuff sounds like the Bandwagon at all. Right. But the spirit of that was really important in getting us to find our thing. And we do a lot of like school or like we've done a lot of school clinic-y things, or like go to colleges and play. And to me, it's like to bring that, our vibe now, to other young people is really exciting and important, to just like, not so that people sound like our band, but just so they can be stoked to like make whatever it is that they're trying to make in a very open way.
Well, it's kind of like Sonny Rollins. You know, the elders are always very cognizant of the fact that you have to keep that torch going, and the elders always want to lend to the younger generation. I mean, that's the strength of jazz, is that the elders are always looking out for the youngers.
Yeah. It's not that we're young or old at this point, but
in the in between, in the gray area.
Yeah, and I think it's cool because we don't know where our band is exactly going. You know, we went from dark record to light record, but it is cool to kind of have an influence wave as we are just kind of still figuring out our path and doing stuff, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of figuring out your path, the answer to your question is the Rolling Stones first concert.
You saw the Rolling Stones?
That's awesome.
Yeah, at RFK Stadium in DC.
Wow. That's
the first like big concert that I went to. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
That's a hell of a way to start.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good job.
fifth grade, I think, or sixth grade.
Wow, yeah. I was going to say the school assembly where in elementary school when that band came to play.
Buttons the Clown came up, and then the band came up. It's like
there was a hook.
Yeah,
that's right. You know, my dad was a car salesman, and he won tickets to see the Jackson 5. So I was 12 years old and went to Arrowhead Stadium. He was like an hour late, but Michael came out of a little hole in the ground, and when that sequin glove came up, it was like Beatlemania. Girls were fainting. The sequins were all blinding us, and we're like, oh my God, there's the guy from the Pepsi commercial. It was it was crazy.
So after you reawoke, the concert was good?
Oh my God, it was crazy. I mean, to see the Jacksons together, I mean, Michael's one thing, but when you see that nuclei, that uniting of DNA together on stage that just launched Motown and all of these things in a magnanimous way, you're like, oh my God, it was crazy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, but you know, speaking of unity and speaking of a group, you know, being together for 12 years, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that's like almost like a marriage. That's a commitment. That's an evolution, and it has to evolve and it has to work. What has been the glue that has kind of held you all together? What has been the evolutionary growth of you to get to a point where, like you said, with your previous album to this album, you grew and got into a more comfortable space? How has that worked for you?
I would say communication is the biggest thing, because we don't know where this thing is going necessarily. You know, like we can all have ideas, but it's a collaborative group. And so I think it's safe to say that we're a very well rehearsed band, and we talk about many aspects of like our intentions with each song and each album and each kind of musical vibe that we want to set. And the spirit is very open. You know, it's, you know, any idea is valid. Usually best idea wins, but oftentimes there's not really a best or worst idea. It's kind of here are all the options. And one of the fun things about this band is we can explore any of those options. You know, it's almost like whatever whim strikes our fancy in that moment. You know, whatever character the room embodies, you know, we can explore that direction.
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, I don't know, like back in 2014, 15 or whatever, when we were like, you know, we should try to do this. Like, I heard about the bandwagon, and like, we should try to like open things up. Like, that was like more of a going from here to here kind of growth. And I think since then, kind of like, I guess as we all get older and are I'm thinking about even just like individually, like practicing the saxophone or something. It's like it's kind of the kind of growth that you don't always notice because it's happening more incrementally as you get older. But it's kind of just deepening what's already there in a lot of ways, and just kind of like checking back in with yourself and with each other. Like we had a rehearsal last night, and it was like, can we play? Like we worked on some songs that we've been playing for years, just because it was like I feel like we're playing, or I felt like we're kind of determining that this song always goes in this certain way, and can we find a way to like open it back up again in a way that feels natural and like not necessarily forced, but just kind of like continuing to like remind ourselves what we're trying to do. And to me it's like that's growth.
Yeah, the game we're playing together, it is for these three people. This band can't play with sub musicians, you know what I mean? Like if you're not in town, the Doc's not playing. If Andrew's gone, the band's not playing. Dustin's out, he's and I think that is probably a big part of the longevity, is that it's very unique to these three people. And we've basically developed this bizarre skill set of how to work together as these three people. And I think because that is so specific and aspirational, like we are always trying to get better at it, that it kind of lends itself to being a long-term project. And it's cool. This band has evolved as we've evolved as people, and I think it's had influence on our personal selves and vice versa. So it's kind of a lofty, ambitious thing that we are just kind of chipping away at. Maybe in the next 12 years we'll get it done.
Yeah, see, look at that, looking down the road. It kind of reminds what you were talking about, like revisiting things. It's that whole idea of Malcolm Gladwell saying, after 10,000 hours, you master something. It's like once you get more comfortable with something, there's a level of you that can feel a little bit more comfortable veering out, I mean, that's what it seems to me coming from the outside in.
Yeah, or like it's also like the more you know, the more you realize what you don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a thing that we're all working on all the time, and we've probably logged 10,000 hours, and we're still.
I guess the thing is each one of us is always like changing. As time goes on, so you never get 2 hours of working on something with like exactly the same people.
We're supposed to keep changing.
I mean, you don't want to Groundhog Day your life, though. It's always good to evolve. So the one thing coming from Kansas City and doing what I do, talking to musicians, is that there always seems to be kind of this very specific way the Chicago scene in my brain works. There's there's kind of a grit to it. There's a playfulness to it. There's a unity. There's a community. There's all of these things. What from your perspective, what do you like the best about being a part of the Chicago jazz scene, and how does it influence the way that you present yourself to the outer jazz world?
Great questions, crushing.
I mean, I feel like I agree with your, assessment. Like I'm by no means like involved in all of the various, micro scenes that there are. But of the, the kind of scenes and communities that I'm a part of, I feel like, there's a sense of community and a sense of kind of like people trying to do their thing and not really worrying too much, maybe just compared to some other places. There is less of a focus on like marketing yourself or like trying to like become famous or break into a like
right
next level of whatever. It's kind of just like people more slowly chipping away at whatever they're doing. And yeah, and I think that's been talking to some, you know, some older people who have been in Chicago for a while. I feel like I've heard people kind of talk about that as being something about Chicago that they've noticed as being different than other places, is that it's, and that's why there's it's probably why there's not as many, you know, jazz stars coming out of Chicago necessarily. That's changing a little bit, but it's like it's a more rare thing, or that's like the thing about the person if they happen to blow up. It's like, oh, Chicago-based trombonist or whatever. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a very grounded scene, and it feels like the scene exists in real life. And you know, playing the Hyde Park Jazz Fest, or you know, we played the Chicago Jazz Fest. It feels like a family, and we're all, you know, sharing this fun event together, rather than like, oh man, did you see so and so got Jazz Fest? Like, oh, he shouldn't have done like it. Yeah, there's none of that. It's just like, oh man, you got Jazz Fest? Awesome, cool.
Yeah.
You know, it just feels good, and it feels like we all are influenced by each other, and we get to see each other play, and you know, split bills, and you know, it allows Chicago to kind of have an identity, whatever that be. And I think it can be a moving target.
You know, Adam Larson, who spent a lot of time in and he spent a lot of time in New York and Chicago and came to Kansas City. And Kansas City used to be a springboard. Now people are coming here. And Clark Summers was playing a festival. And I was telling my wife, I was like, this dude's a beast, you know, I mean, and Adam is too. And she was like, who is he again? And I was like, that's kind of emblematic of what you were saying about Chicago. Like, this guy's prolific. This guy's been on all over the place, and seeing him live was like, oh, I mean, he was just tearing it up. But that's the thing. It's like it's almost, and I feel like that with Kansas City too. There's a reviewer here in town that kind of gets a little tired of Kansas City musicians not being more on downbeat lists and things going. And I feel like Chicago and Kansas City are kind of synonymous. You're so into what you're creating, you're so in the moment, you're in the scene, you're doing your thing. It's like, it's fine if the outside world sees it, but there's a self-edification by doing what you want to do, you know, and, you know, making that local organism as strong as possible. And it's by osmosis. It's not something conscious. Like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make the Chicago scene as strong as I can. It's like, you're just doing what you do, and everybody feeds into it, from Clark all the way down. Everybody's doing, you know, the Von Freeman era and all of that. It's like, it just kind of feeds into the vibe.
Yeah, it's right.
Yeah.
Clark Summers is awesome.
Yeah, he is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you, or it makes me feel like excited. You think of all the cities where there's these like these little ecosystems or big ecosystems, and all of the things that you maybe don't hear about in whatever the public space beyond that city. But there's all these things happening everywhere, and all this cool music that's being made, and these things that, to me, I'm stoked about that. And Chicago is a good place for me because I like being in an environment that is sustainable enough to not be super stressful or something, or not feel pressured to make music in a certain way or present myself in a certain way that is not authentic. So yeah.
So let's step back here a little bit. We were talking about the first show you saw. So let me ask you this. I want to go out on a triumphant note. If a time machine pulls up in front of your house when we get off this call, and you can go back in the history of jazz and see one show, where are you going?
That Clark Summers, Adam Larson hit that you saw.
See, look at that. We're coming right full circle.
Man, I think I would have to go with Coltrane Quartet.
Yep.
5 spot, probably.
That's the number one answer, by the way. It's always Coltrane in whatever incarnation.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I can't imagine what that was like.
Yeah, that would be mine, or Miles at the Plug Nickel.
Yeah, that's always up there. You know, I interviewed Terry Gibbs at one point, and he traveled with Coltrane when him and Alice were falling in love. And one of the coolest stories I ever heard was how Alice was really shy and how she would sit in the phone booth in the back of the club in New York and just ogle at John, and how they kind of like were both really shy and all of that. That would have, like, when I think about like the history, like I would have loved to have seen Ella in Harlem the first time she got on that stage at the Apollo and everybody was jeering, and she just totally blew them away. Just magnanimously blew them away because they had no idea. But to see the sparks between John and Alice, can you imagine the energy in the room? I mean, that would be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you guys doing? Speaking of Twin Talk Live, I urge everyone to go out and get it. It's been on the show. Highly recommended. If anyone wants to catch you live, pick up this album that's going to be the most beneficial to you financially and otherwise. How do people do that?
Let's see. In order of financial lucrativeness, come to a show. We have a few dates up on our website, twintalkmusic.com. And you can buy it at a show, or you can go to Bandcamp. We have links to that at our website. We're also on Instagram at Twin Talk Band. And if you're gonna stream it, Tidal's the best, then Apple Music. Spotify's the worst. Don't do that. And if you just like streaming it and you don't have a record player or a CD player or whatever, you can just like buy a digital download on Bandcamp as a way of saying we love you, and then we'll say we love you too.
Yeah. And then just keep our record streaming with the volume down.
Yeah, go to sleep with it on silent.
That's what I'm saying. See, that's and especially on Friday. Friday's the best day to do Bandcamp, right? Bandcamp Fridays. Is that still a deal?
They have like special Fridays, and I think this one might be one.
Is this one?
I'm not sure.
I think it's the first Friday of each month.
Okay.
Whatever. Just Venmo us. Who cares?
Yeah, just throw money.
Yeah.
You know.
But yeah, wherever you are, just go see live music all the time and buy people's records if they're still alive.
Yeah, and be enthusiastic about music you like, and share it with friends and talk about it. Like word of mouth is really how the message spreads.
If you hate our band, tell an enemy.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for the story. Thank you for your time, the musical exuberance, and best of luck with everything.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much.
You bet.